Advice given is for general information purposes. All legal cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
I've got R.J. Harris's issue of In Touch here. You know, it's amazing what magazines he reads. If you look through... a lot of men's weightlifting magazines for some reason. I'm just thinking of Tobias from Arrested Development. But anyhow, In Touch, cover right here. Amanda Bynes, destroyed by fame. The former child star hits rock bottom. Inviting strange men to her drug den at 2 a.m. Passed out on dirty mattress. I want a baby so I can be the next Kim Kardashian, she said. I follow her on Twitter now just to see what she's up to because I was sick and tired of waiting for TMZ to get me the news when I can just get it straight to my phone. Tony, you were cut off there a minute ago. You were saying you had a contractor do some work and the fee doesn't seem to be fair versus what they did, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems grossly overpriced.
And your insurance carrier, who somehow was involved in this, has said, just send in the amount you think is fair.
Yeah.
And I said before the break, write satisfaction and accord on the check, on the memo line. Satisfaction and accord, A-C-C-O-R-D.
Okay.
That's magic words. That means if there's a dispute about what something should cost and somebody cashes the check, that ends the dispute. That will become your defense if they were ever to sue you.
Okay. So I'm like, I mean, are they able to affect my credit or?
Well, they can try, I guess. I mean, if they report you out and claim you didn't pay. Write satisfaction and accord on the check. Pay what you think is owed. Otherwise, make them sue you or sue them. But my advice is do that. And it sounds like the insurance guy is saying, I'll also talk to them and make sure they accept whatever you send them.
Okay.
So it sounds like you had an easy out. I mean, they did some work, right?
Well, what they did, actually, once the contractor took it off to put up new siding, he said it was really wet behind there.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly, you know, like I said, it wasn't...
So it wasn't done well, so you don't think you owe them anything?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Are you of the opinion at this point that you don't owe them anything?
No, I mean, I would be willing to pay them for their time, and which, you know, the rate they gave, it would seem like it was $2,000 an hour.
Right.
So that seemed, you know, but I didn't know.
But what I'm trying to ask you is there an amount that you feel is fair to pay them? Based on everything you know right now.
It's like $200.
Okay, write them a check for $200. Write satisfaction accord on the memo line, and see what happens.
Okay.
All right, that's step one. If that works, done. Forget about it. Move on. If they don't cash it or refuse to cash it, then it might be time to have the lawyer letter written to them.
If they do cash it, we're done?
That's what those magic words, satisfaction and accord, on the memo line are for.
Okay.
All right, brother?
All right, man.
All right. You got it. Is this Lewis or Lois? Lewis.
No, Lewis. Hi, Carl.
How are you?
I'm fascinated with the revelation about the metadata that the government is acquiring on everybody through the phone companies. They made the argument that it's the same thing as the Postal Service looking at the to and from addresses on an envelope. However, I don't necessarily put a return address on my envelope all the time.
Well, okay, and let me give you an explanation here. A very interesting thing a federal judge said at a lecture I was at one time. Federal judge said, theoretically, right, if I put a photograph in the mail and send it to you, I don't expect you to show it to everybody in the world, right? So even though I've made something quasi-public by putting it in the mail and sending it to somebody else, I don't necessarily expect that picture is going to end up, posted on a billboard somewhere. So just to say because you've carried out a transaction or done something that you have no expectation of privacy in it. So here's an example. We would all agree that strangers can't call AT&T up and say, hey, who's Rominger been texting? Or how frequently has he called this number, right? We all have an expectation that that's not going to be generally available information. Now, we all agree that if anybody's an authorized user on the account, they should be able to call up and say, who the heck is this number, right? You follow me? You agree?
Yeah.
Right? So our expectation of privacy is not that anybody can just read these things anytime they want. Now, the metadata, as they've said, actually can show you more relevant things necessarily than the conversations people had.
Well, here's what scares me about it is because now if the government has all this data and, they want to look at, okay, let's see who's consulting some mental health professionals, and then they cross-reference that with firearm ownership, then they can take a legal means to go after the people that own firearms.
Yeah, let's not forget that most of this metadata also includes what tower you were hitting off of, or what base station, and what direction you were from the tower. And so, particularly in urban areas, they can narrow down your location very, very carefully. So not only could we look at it and see that you called, Holy Spirit Hospital, we could then see that your cell phone was pinging off of a tower that services Holy Spirit Hospital. We could then see, that you were there for, 2 days. We could then see where you went next, And the point is, you can go back and see if as they archive this, which they have the endless ability to do, they can keep looking through it. So, but hey, it caught a couple terrorists, they said, right? That's what they said. But they also said, well, we're not actually listening to the text of the calls or the emails. Well, wait a minute, we are on the PRISM thing, but that just monitors foreign nationals or things that we think involve foreign nationals. But by the way, if I send an email, I guess every time I get an email from one of these Russian spammers, I'm now communicating with foreign nationals, and I guess that makes my account a viable one to look into, right? Because I'm getting emails from foreign nationals. Because only one party of the transaction had to be a foreign national in this PRISM thing. Although there's just reason to believe it's a foreign national. Yeah, it's a massive invasion of privacy. It is a government who is going to use your location, your metadata, and the contents. Because let's be honest, as of 3 days ago, they claimed they didn't even sniff the metadata, right?
Right.
So now they go, well, we are getting the metadata, but no more than that. Nobody's actually listening to your phone call, says the president. Yeah, right. So here's how it works, folks. They are recording everything we're doing, databasing it, and we all expect Facebook to crunch the numbers of who our likes are and what we're doing and advertise things to us. And we all expect AT&T to, market things to us based on what they know we're up to. But I'm not sure we've signed on as a society to let the government simply do whatever they want. By the way, the government's trying to force cell phone manufacturers to put kill switches into the smartphones, ostensibly so that you would have a kill switch in there, so if it was, quote, stolen, they could just shut it off, and make it unusable. But wouldn't a kill switch with that kind of databasing and information also make it possible just to, I don't know, maybe you were being harassed by government agents or charged with trumped-up charges. They just kill your cell phone while they're at it, right? Besides knowing where you are and what you're doing with it and who you've talked to for the last 5 years.
Right.
Boy. So, and the other thing is, they're going to get to a point where they're going to start crunching this, like you said, well, you're a risk factor. I don't know. Why are you a risk factor? I don't know. Because our computer says you're a risk factor. Because we don't really know. See, when you get really large sets of data, N equals all is kind of like the you can collect everything. And you start doing regression analysis on it and all these kinds of things and statistical analysis is, a lot of times they can decide that certain things mean that you're about to do something bad. But they couldn't tell you why, which means because that level of data collection and analysis doesn't always allow for a causation analysis. So if you fit a certain statistical profile, then maybe it's better just to eliminate you with a drone strike. But there's going to be a few people who fit that statistical profile that just happen to call, the wrong 3 phone numbers somehow.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. All right, my friend, good luck.
Thank you.
By the way, you'll never hear the drone coming. See you after the break. Oh, we're back. 540-0580. Eric. Eric, my friend. Eric.
Hi, how are you today?
Good.
Good. I have a I have a rental property in Carlisle, and the woman hasn't paid me, and she's getting in arrears pretty bad. Her last couple checks bounced. She was paying me every 2 weeks for a short period of time. I think it's time I might have to ask her to leave. What am I required legally to make it right?
To make it right, turn the heat off, turn the electric off, pinch the water line, set the place on fire. Now, those are all the wrong things to do. Do you have a lease?
Say again?
Do you have a lease?
No, not at this point.
Okay, so there's no written lease.
I'm sorry, I'm having a tough time hearing you.
Eric, is there a written lease? If I yell, can you hear me better?
No, not really. What was the last word?
A lease. L-E-A-S-E. We're talking about landlord-tenant stuff. Lease.
Right, correct.
Is there a lease?
The lease is expired.
Okay. What does it say about the notice to be given when somebody's to be evicted?
Well, if you don't pay the rent, I mean, that's a good reason to evict.
No,
somebody.
what does it say? My friend, who wrote your lease? The internet? Yourself?
You're
Staples?
like modulating. I can't hear you too well. I'm sorry.
All right, well, dude, I can't answer your question then. It's just the way it's going to be.
I'm sorry. Let me
Call in on a landline, my friend. All right, let me answer his question anyhow, because I already know what his question is. If you have a lease, the lease will say what kind of notice you must give to evict somebody. And while they're technically on a month-to-month and the lease is over, the lease would kind of control. So a lot of leases will say 5 days notice. Otherwise, it's 30 days notice, my friend. So hopefully you have a well-written lease. And what you would do then is post a notice to quit, which is a document that says either pursuant to lease term blank, you are given X days to vacate, or pursuant to the Landlord-Tenant Act, you're given 15 days to vacate, or pursuant to the Landlord-Tenant Act, you're given 30 days to vacate as appropriate. And then when that time expires, you go to the district judge and you file an eviction. So they still don't have to leave yet. And when you file that eviction, off they go. Pretty simple. Ryan, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's going on, Ryan? Hey, Ryan.
Hey. Basically, I've been trying to get a position as a police officer for the past year.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep running into the same issue, which is an issue in my background, but it was 8.5 years ago. And I've never done drugs, never even tried a drug. I've never been drunk in my life because, they go through all that and look at your background, your job history and all that. But when I married my wife, she was 16 and I was 21.
Okay.
So I understand that's looked at kind of a certain way, and it's been a speed bump for me, and I believe that's the main reason for my being rejected to become a police officer. But being that it was 8.5 years ago, we're still married today. We have 2 kids, and now I'm trying to, this is what I really want to do with my life and how I want to support my family. Being the time and distance there, I believe I have a good argument to win the appeal, but wanted to know your thoughts on what you know about civil service appeals, what you think my shot is, and if it's worth looking into having representation at the hearing.
Okay. So you have a civil service hearing?
Yes.
Yeah, and this was what, a PFA?
I'm sorry?
What's the bump? I mean, was it an actual charge or was it a Protection from Abuse Act order?
They were charges, but they were dropped. They were null prost, and even the arrest record has been expunged.
So how's it even showing up?
It's not showing up other than, they can see that I had something expunged, but they can't see what. But, of course, the process is very thorough, and I have to divulge the information.
And it's been creating you problems.
Correct.
Well, I think it'd probably be a good idea to have representation.
Okay.
Yeah. And
okay.
What's going to happen with it, I don't know. It would seem to me that if the charges were dropped, and I don't know why they were dropped.
Her father requested that they be dropped.
Right.
So.
And you guys are still together?
Yeah, we've been married for 8.5 years. We have 2 kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, only thing I can tell you is there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into what makes a police officer, right?
Right.
So, all right, boss, good luck.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great answer, I know, but, sounds like there was a little bit of a problem there. When you disclose that little problem, sometimes they're just not sure they want you as a police officer, And with the civil service, I don't know how that overlays with that. Patrick, revocable trust versus something.
Yes, Carl. I understand. I heard recently that it's a lot easier on your next of kin if you have a revocable trust versus a regular will because you don't have to go through probate. Is that correct?
The answer on that is not exactly true. And what I mean by that is you still have to have a probate and you still have to do the tax return and all those good things. Some of the assets can still transfer outside the probate, okay? But they're still subject to the power of the probate court potentially if there's a problem with it. But I think the real difference is in a couple of states like Arizona and New York, as I understand it, a revocable trust is a huge advantage. In Pennsylvania, any estate we've ever had where they have it in it doesn't really change things very much.
Oh, okay. That must have been what I heard. It must have been from another state.
Well, and there are people that pitch them here, okay? And they do have a couple advantages in the sense that you can update it any time, so you could, but theoretically you can do the same with a will anyhow, particularly in this day and age. So I don't see, and maybe if Nesbitt's listening out there, he can chime in on this, but I don't see a huge advantage to revocable trusts. On the other hand, irrevocable trusts can provide huge advantages, but they also mean losses of control, okay?
Okay.
So if you want to defeat the government or the nursing home or the tax man or the spendthrift son-in-law, trusts, irrevocable trusts especially, are a good way to go. But then again, you give up control. And so the more control you have, the less it's going to be treated as an irrevocable trust.
Do you still have to go through probate with the irrevocable trust?
No, an irrevocable trust would be its own separate entity. And since Pennsylvania got rid of the rule against perpetuities, they can go on forever now.
Okay.
So you can create a trust, for instance. So I'll just give you an example of here's a trust possibility. We have a family farm that's worth $1 million. Nobody really farms anymore, though. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I want my kids to be able to use the land. But I'm pretty sure that one of my boys is going to want to sell the place the minute I die, right? Mm-hmm. Sort of like the old farmer Wang Lung in the Good Earth. As soon as he's getting close to death, the boys are plotting to sell his land already. So I put it into trust, and I say, all right, the four of you are going to be the beneficiaries of this trust. So whatever money you get from the hay and the crops off the thing after the expenses of the farm are going to be divided amongst you. And in the meantime, you can all hunt the land. And then the grandkids can have the farm, and then on and on and on and on. And then I can have a provision in there that says, however, 4 generations down, if nobody wants the farm anymore, or everybody can agree, then you can do something with it. So I could force the land into the family that way.
Do you still have to go through probate with the irrevocable trust?
No. That irrevocable trust is outside of probate.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's its own creature now. It pays its own tax bill. It's got its own lawyer. It's got its own everything. It's a living, breathing person for all intents and purposes.
Okay. To get a lawyer to set up something like that, give me a general idea how much that costs.
Well, with trusts, you're talking anywhere from, let's just say anywhere from $1,000 to thousands of dollars, depending on how in depth it's going to be, how big the estate is, and how much lifting you're trying to accomplish with it. So you're going to find that trust vehicles are usually not, people with small net worths a lot of times aren't using irrevocable trusts. On the other hand, people with special needs kids, for instance, may find that they want to use a special needs trust or other forms of irrevocable trusts for smaller estates where the economic decisions are sometimes balanced out because of the need to create this entity, because you just want the money floating around, and you want to keep the person's access to benefits available.
Okay. If it's just all cash and no assets, would that be a good way to go, irrevocable trust?
Well, you can put cash in the irrevocable trust, but then you can't spend it, right?
Right.
But the trust could have provisions for maintenance and support and care of you or other beneficiaries. I couldn't tell you if it's a good way to go or not without, knowing what you're trying to accomplish, et cetera, but it's certainly something you'd probably want to sit down with a lawyer and talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
All right?
Thanks for your help.
540-0580. John, you're on the air. Hey, John. John, you eating a sandwich? What's going on? John.
Yes, sir.
All right, what were you eating? A sandwich? What's going on there? Getting your submarine out?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I got a quick question for you. My son had a second DUI, and his first one was in PA, his second one was in New Jersey, and that was a marijuana issue. He's applied. He's been suspended for a year, and he went to get his license back because the suspension date has passed, and they want to put something on in his car.
Guardian interlock, sort of dealer interlock.
Does that have to be court ordered?
Does it have to be court ordered? No, I mean, PennDOT can send you a letter that requires it. That's not a court order. That's an administrative order.
Okay, so they can do it administratively because it wasn't in the order from Jersey.
Now, yeah, because is it PennDOT that's requiring it?
Right.
Yeah, because they're doing it under the driver's license compact, saying it was a substantially similar offense in New Jersey, and therefore they're going to require that.
Okay, so administratively, then they can do that, and it doesn't have to be in the court order.
I would think that is the answer. In other words, the conviction in New Jersey, okay, let's with apples and oranges. The conviction in New Jersey is just that, a conviction in New Jersey. Right?
Right.
PennDOT has learned of that conviction, and they are carrying out Pennsylvania law as they are administratively able to do. So what's in the New Jersey order is irrelevant, except that the New Jersey order appears to PennDOT to be substantially similar to a DUI in Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your time.
All right, my friend, good luck.
Right, bye-bye.
I don't think he likes my answer, but what do you want me to say? 540-0580, back after the break. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Just answering legal questions here. Of course, if you want to learn more about our firm, go to romingerlaw.com. And you can always friend me on Facebook. It's Carl with a K, last name Rominger. We have the Rominger & Associates page. Both my page and the Rominger & Associates page have exclusive content on them, and we answer legal questions on them routinely, so wouldn't hurt to be there. Carl, this is Carl. What's going on, Carl?
Hey, Carl. How you doing today? Good. Listen, I got a question for you real quick. My son originally lost his license for, I think it was open container. It was a suspension. And it was for an underage alcohol offense. Right. And he was revoked for 90 days. Then he actually got caught again not drinking. He got caught driving with his license suspended. So they then gave him a 1-year suspension. Right. Okay. Now, that was back in January of 2011. It says on here it's supposed to begin. And I believe they took his license when that happened. I literally physically took his license from him. Mm-hmm. And then he went back the other day to get a new license, and they told him that no, they weren't going to give him a license because he didn't do something about calling them or reporting to them to start his suspension. Does that sound right?
So they're giving him a date to start a suspension?
Yeah, they did give him a date to start the suspension, and it says on the paperwork that his eligibility date. Oh, that's a new paper. I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself at the same time I'm talking to you. Yeah, it's been like 2 years. I mean, he didn't go back and get his license after the time he was out of college. He didn't have a car. He didn't need it. So then he went back to get it, and now they're telling him that the time period that he was supposed to have his license revoked didn't start because he didn't report to somebody or call somebody. Yeah,
he needs to. If he didn't have a license to surrender, he had to. Then if you have to surrender your license and have proof of it, okay, to start your suspension, or if you don't have a license, it's when you first apply that it starts. So he gets no credit for that time.
So he has to go and start all over again.
Yeah. Now, he can go to PennDOT and apply for a credit hearing where he says, I should get some credit retroactively.
Okay.
And so where I've seen that one goes like this. Guy says, I lived in Pittsburgh. I didn't have my license for 2 years, but I didn't drive. And PennDOT says, well, we don't know about that. And he produces 2 years of bus passes. Mm-hmm. Right, so that seems pretty credible. He's riding the bus every day.
Right. Well, he was at college. He literally lived in his dorm. I mean, not a dorm. Yeah. He lived in an apartment right across the street from the college.
So you need to prove, you present some evidence there. At the hearing, I would bring him. I'd bring his schooling records, something showing the address, a map showing the proximity to school. I'd bring dear old dad in to say we didn't give him a car, we didn't let him have a car, and we didn't pay for a car, and he didn't have a car. All that good stuff.
Correct.
So you could go to PennDOT and apply for the credit hearing. I think there's a $100 application fee on that, and then you get an administrative hearing.
All right, very good. Hey, thanks a lot, Carl. Appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, very, very important. If you've lost your license or you're going to lose your license, you need to surrender it when they want you to surrender it, or else bad things will happen to you. Mike, what's going on?
What's going on, Mike Goomba? What are you doing in that office over there?
What do you mean? I'm just sitting over here keeping Bob Durgan's chair warm.
I think you're... I shouldn't say this because I like Bob, but, if he ever needs a replacement, you could kind of move right on in.
I can't comment on that.
Yeah, why? I know.
Besides, I'd rather be in the morning show and ring the bell.
Hey, so let's talk about leases and apartments and those tenants that become bums.
Yeah.
They have money for their drugs and women and this and that, but they don't have the money to pay for their rent. Can you believe this? They have money for all this freaking recreation, but those bums have no money for the landlord under which the roof they live. Can you believe this?
Right. I can, actually. Right? We see it.
What's that?
We see it once in a while.
Yeah. So listen, let me tell you something.
Yes.
So I know of some people, this is how they handle those kind of tenants. I know of a person that handled it like this. So he walks in, knocks on the door, the tenant opens the door, and you tell me your thoughts. And he's like, hey, so-and-so, now listen, I didn't get the rent yet. Now, when the guy walked in, he has a permit to carry, but, he flashed his piece, not flash it, but, you could tell he had it. He goes, now look, Jimmy, I got to have you out in about 2 days. You're late on the rent. I got somebody else got to move in. So, just do me a favor, make that happen. And Jimmy's like, hey, no problem, man. 2 days, I'm out of here.
Right.
Boom. 2 days, he's gone.
Now, when these guys come in,
what's that?
When they come in, do they mention anything about Marcellus or anything?
Any what?
Never mind. That's a reference to Pulp Fiction.
Listen, I know of another case, right? But
let me just say on the first case scenario here. Obviously, you're not privileged to use force to remove a tenant like that, and the display of the weapon could be considered a use of force. But I would imagine that these things happen frequently, and like trees who fall in the woods and don't make a sound, if nobody calls the police or files a complaint, then it's probably not an issue. But again, wouldn't be recommended course of conduct.
Yeah, okay. Here's another case. And listen, what I'm sharing with you and the listeners is, at least for this guy, man, it worked like a charm. Here's another case. So the bum decides he doesn't want to pay his rent, right? He's calling him and calling him and calling him, and the guy's not answering the phone. And the tenant, the landlord's like, that son of a gun, I'm going to get him. So the landlord goes down to the basement, and he turns off the heat. And it wasn't too long, he finally gets a hold of the tenant, because the tenant calls him and says, hey, so-and-so, for some reason the heat's not working. And the Mr. Landlord goes, hey, Jimmy, how you doing? I was trying to get a hold of you.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get the rent. I was just wondering what's going on. It's amazing how fast they come up with the rent money.
Well, that is kind of funny, right? I had a client one time who was asked by a mechanic to tow a car that had sat for 4 years on his lot to the scrap heap, and of course, the poor guy towed it to the scrap heap. And in the meantime, the state police came to see him because they wanted to know why he stole this woman's car. And the joke was, of course, once the state police officer understood what was going on, was, obviously they weren't going to charge him with theft. But she had left it there, abandoned it for 4 years. But the very day that this poor guy finally takes it off his lot, after he's never been paid for doing the work on it, she reports it's stolen, meaning she was driving by every day and just, not picking up her car or paying her bill. But the day somebody took it, she decided she was wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, same idea, right?
Yeah, it just goes to show you the lessons. How I'm all for doing it lawfully, and that's how I operate. I'm just sharing with you cases that I know there are certain people out there that they would say, look, the law just takes too long. We're going to handle it our own way. And at least this guy, he was pretty successful with doing it his own way.
Yeah. Of course, it only has to go terribly wrong one time, and that's the downside.
What's that?
The downside is it only has to go terribly wrong one time.
Right.
And then you got problems. All right, my friend, thank you very much.
Yeah, to all you bums, keep paying your rent, please.
All right, bye. Dave, you want to talk about landlord-tenants?
Well, Carl, I can just answer Mike, since he seems to be always one-sided. In my opinion, I've been both a tenant and a landlord. And, you get bad tenants, and you need to deal with that. But you get bad landlords, too.
Oh, yeah, we know. We've got a few of those.
Everybody's calling, the bums, and that's Mike. But I'm just pointing that out, that I'm not sure it depends where you live. But often, and there's a lot of slumlords in cities. Maybe not Harrisburg, but they, like Philadelphia, where I'm from.
Right.
I'm just pointing out that it can go both ways.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And it kind of bothers me when everybody's jumping. It's always the tenants, and it's not always the tenants. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, Jay, take care.
Take care.
540-0580. We'll come back from the break. We'll talk with John. Okay, we're back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Of course, I want to remind you to truck on over to Harrisburg Beer and Cigar, Union Deposit Road near the Lowe's, the strip mall back there. They're going to have a big event. Jack Turano, Sam Licia launching Licia cigars. They're the famous makers of nubs and canes. If you know anything about cigars, it's going to be June 12th from 4 to 7 p.m. They always have great events over there. When you stop in to buy your beer or cigars, tell them Carl sent you. John, you're on WHP 580. What's going on?
I have a question about this metadata the government's collecting.
Uh-huh.
If they're using it to generate lists of people being targeted by the IRS, would that be considered illegal by a normal person?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what are they using it for? It's being collected by the NSA, which is really part of the military, right? So,
if you called, let's say, one of these groups that they were targeting, and they use people who called those lists or those...
Well, they can mine this data for anything. They can mine this data for anything. That's the point. Yeah, that's absolutely the problem. And the problem is that the government was caught red-handed, the IRS in particular in this recent instance, targeting certain groups based on political belief in small government, things like that, and beating them up on behest of either the government itself or the current administration, whichever way you want to view it, okay? So, yeah, but we're supposed to trust them with all this data. Trust us. We won't misuse it. We don't misuse data.
But if they're actually using it to generate new lists of people to target...
Well, we don't know if they have or they haven't. How would we know that? I'm just saying, yes, that would probably be a problem. But how are you going to find out about it?
If you had one of those lists that was generated.
What I'm trying to say is they have a massive database. They're generating thousands and thousands of lists and subsets of data out of this all the time.
Right. So if somehow you had a list like that.
Well, who's got it? I mean, who's going to turn it over? I don't know. But yeah, it would obviously if it's being used to target, we know that targeting by the IRS was illegal and wrong, right?
Right.
Okay, so use of the list would be illegal and wrong too. But the federal government doesn't even admit that these things exist. They've only recently barely admitted they exist. Up until now, nobody's been able to go to court and do anything because they pull the state secrets privilege. And then if you went to court and said, I think they're listening to my telephone conversation, the judge would say, all right, government, are you listening to their telephone conversations? And the president's lawyers would say, state secrets privilege, judge. And you say, okay, they don't have to answer that.
So the government can just say, this is all privileged or top secret.
It's state secret. It's national security. They can just keep saying national security. It took somebody to leak this document for us to know anything about this.
So even if you had one of these lists, it doesn't do you any good.
Correct. In fact, there was a guy who worked at, what was it, Area 51 or 54 or wherever the aliens are, and his widow tried to sue the Air Force saying that he'd been exposed to chemicals there in these burn pits. But the government wouldn't hand over any data because they said it's a matter of national security and they can't talk anything about this base. Therefore, she couldn't bring the lawsuit because she couldn't prove that her husband had gone to work all those years and where he had worked and what he was exposed to because they didn't have to answer any questions about it. That's how the state secrets privilege works. It allows the government to simply assert that it is a state secret, and then the court cannot make them produce it. Therefore, when they're telling you that there's court oversight of these things and congressional approval, lie, 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 lie. There is very limited court oversight because courts know very little and can't effectively oversight it. And in the meantime, Congress has sort of suggested we didn't really have full briefings on this stuff. We weren't really told what the scope and nature of it is. So how can they approve it if they don't know about it? So lies, lies, lies. The government spy apparatus here is as bad as any third world banana republic, and they just don't want you to know it. Now we do.
So no matter what anybody has or anybody prints, nothing's going to happen.
John, the only way things are going to happen is if Congress gets up off its duff and passes a law that says you cannot do this and it must be exposed and we're allowed to talk about it. But even Congress people are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid they're going to be put in jail by the administration. Their hands are tied by, quote, national security laws as well.
So if somebody has something that the government, somebody created and said, hey, you blatantly lied to Congress, nobody's going to happen because Holder works for the president, and he's not going to prosecute him.
Right, absolutely. And more importantly, Holder probably couldn't either because he would have to release information. They tried to do this to defense attorneys not too long ago when it came to child pornography. They were saying that for the defense attorney to look at what the government said was the child pornography would re-victimize the children, and therefore you just have to take the government's word for it that there was, unlawful images, and that's why your guy should go to jail.
Right.
So, now the courts didn't exactly buy that one, but that way they weren't claiming state secrets privilege, which courts have bought again and again and again. And, of course, we have this secret FISA court and this, secret panel of judges who decide things with no review whatsoever. I mean, how do we know that judge is independent? How do we know? Because, well, he says he is, and so does the administration. And so there you go.
And that he's not being blackmailed by the IRS.
Or anyone else, for that matter. Or is it actually a CIA operative who's disguised as a judge? I mean, who knows? Who knows the depth and reach of this thing? But they're never going to admit what they're up to. They're never going to admit it. The only way that's going to be routed out is for Congress and or a president to actually, Jimmy Carter declassified the stealth thing for his own political advantage. It didn't work. Congress occasionally leaks things. But I'm speculating the Chinese leaked this just because they wanted to throw our country into a little tizzy right while we're having our big meeting with them, particularly when we're beating up them on cybersecurity.
Right. Okay, so you're saying you can get mad about it, but there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, there's really no practical remedy, except maybe take your guns on July 4th and go march in that giant protest down there so that you can subject yourself to further scrutiny and arrest.
Right. So everybody who called the Carl Romacher show weekend appointment this week, it has been noted on the government.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Right. Have a great
All right, my friend.
weekend.
Good thing you used a fake name. Good luck. Howard, how are you? We can talk about more mundane things here. What's going on?
Oh, Carl, love your show. Hey, what I wanted to check on, my mother's got too much money, but not a lot.
Right.
And in order to qualify for Medicaid, we're told that she has to, this is in New Jersey, she has to spend it down so that she's got no more than $2,000, cash.
Okay.
Prepaid funeral expenses were suggested as a good reason to spend money.
Okay.
To get the money down. Now, I'm really leery of anything that locks things up without any chance of change. But again, she's going to die someday, so we got to spend the money. What's your thoughts on do lawyers do this for a funeral director? Would I do this through a lawyer? What do you think the norm is for that, for the process?
Repeat that for me.
Okay. Do you think a funeral director would have the wherewithal to set up an irrevocable trust, which I would fund for those funeral costs?
The funeral directors do that as a course of business. They create these prepaid funerals. And a lot of times they use either an insurance policy or a trust account. And I would have no reason to doubt, at least knowing the funeral directors that I know, that they would have any trouble doing it.
Okay. All right. Now, by and large, it is irrevocable, and irrevocable means irrevocable. So I better make sure I don't overfund it. On the other hand, it doesn't seem like you can overfund the funeral expenses. So
Yeah. I mean, you cannot. And the short answer is, obviously, there could be a refund if it was truly overfunded. But I would say that is a good way to spend it down. Again, these are the days when I wish Dave Nesbitt would call in and answer that question for us. He's my buddy with Keystone Elder Law. But I agree that prepaid funerals are generally accepted as one of those expenses that nobody's going to flag. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't like I bought a big screen TV for the grandkids.
Okay, yeah. But I get anything else come to mind as a real good expenditure?
No, there's gifting limits. You have to be really careful. What I would do is talk with a social worker, and if you're dealing with one, and let them give you the suggestions because they'll have the most current information. Plus, it's New Jersey, so I dare not speculate.
Okay, I understand. Well, look, I appreciate it very much, and I love your show.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
All right. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Of course, I want to remind you, CDL Labor Logistics is seeking experienced, qualified commercial drivers with clean records for long-term, high-paying driving positions, both local and regional in PA, Maryland, New York, and New Jersey. Call 866-293-1880. Be sure and tell them Carl sent you. Again, if you're a CDL driver, they also have team driver positions available with a guaranteed $75,000 a year. 866-293-1880. Again, CDL Labor Logistics, 866-293-1880. Give them a call. Tell them I sent you and that you're looking for a high-paying truck driving position. They're pretty good guys. I know them personally. 866-293-1880, CDL Labor Logistics. Also want to remind you, stop into Carlisle Beer and Cigar. That is over in Carlisle near the Walmart. They've got a great beer selection. I've been drinking some of it this weekend, and a great cigar selection. I've been smoking some of that this weekend. Some of that. Sounds like I'm smoking something else. Oh, boy, what else do I have here? Oh, I'm going to be on Thursday, July 18th at 7 p.m. speaking to the 912 Patriots of Adams County, discussing the Second Amendment, gun rights, and laws. We'll be at the Cross Keys Motor Inn Restaurant and Lounge, Route 30 and 94. It's open to the public. So hope to see you there. Guys, I'll be back next week to answer more of your legal questions.